So, hey everybody. Let me introduce myself and my colleagues will introduce themselves, and then we'll do a quick conversation about grounded theory as an introduction. And of course, know that the QualLab is here and faculty and all that are here for you. So my name is Pasque. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am a faculty in the HESA program, and I'm also the director of the QualLab and qualitative methods for the whole college.
Hi, y'all. I'm Chelsea Gilbert. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a second year PhD student in HESA. I work with Penny in the QualLab as well as on some other qualitative related projects. And I'm happy to be here and to talk through this with you all.
Renee, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Renee Bowling. I'm also a second year PhD student, and I am helping provide administrative student to HESA doctoral programs. So you're also welcome to reach out to me if I can help in any way as you're thinking through analysis steps.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And it's fun to talk through this stuff because I love research. All right. I'm going to start a slideshow here. And to share a little bit about the QualLab, this is who we are, our website. You can sign up for consultations for one-on-ones for any dissertation in practice, publications, or anything other than just straight up coursework. So this is the team. We do consultations, and also for EDDs in HESA program, we'll do a group session in the beginning of January, so you can bring your analysis and we'll just workshop things for you. But if you're not in that program and are watching this video, consultations anytime. So the basics of qualitative or any research project, really, you already know this, I'm sure, is that you're starting with a problem statement, the larger literature, and then also for dissertations in practice and for any dissertation, it really is more than just a problem statement. It's that so what makes a difference? What changes are we going to make based on this research? How does it impact the world? And then your review of literature, and you should dive right down into your solid research question that you want to answer and have an intentional research design. Today will be about grounded theory, and through your collection and through your methods for analysis and trustworthiness steps, how you will actually come up with findings and then make that the recommendations to the field. So qualitative is very iterative. So there's not one right way to do anything, which can be kind of tough when you're used to knowing all the steps for conflict mediation process or whatever issue you're working with. That's not a good one because there's many conflict resolution processes, but in any case, there are many different options. And one of the things that I've developed with students is actually to write up a visual of the larger research process. And so I did this after teaching for years, and I'm working with Sage on a book with this right now. And I know for a lot of programs, we'll talk in the PhD programs mainly about epistemology, ontology, axiology, but praxeology is actually taking it to practice and not just research on a shelf. And then each one of these boxes becomes a header or a subheader for your dissertation in practice. You have your theoretical framework and your design, like grounded theory, and then collection. Here are my participants and my sample size and who I'm recruiting and how I'm recruiting them and what we're doing for collection and then what we're doing for analysis. And then thinking through the findings. It's not always done in this order in every study, but this is a guide to start with. Chelsea is going to talk.
So we're just going to give a really quick overview of grounded theory as a methodology, because as you could see from that sheet, it's really important at every stage of your research process that you're thinking about congruence and doing things that fall in line with your epistemological and methodological approach. So grounded theory originally came out of post-positivism, and it's grounded in a belief that theory can emerge through qualitative data analysis, which back in the 1960s was a pretty innovative idea. It's since developed into many different iterations. So Kathy Sharma's developed grounded theory from a constructivist perspective. And the thing that all grounded theory approaches have in common is that there are multiple stages of collecting, refining, and categorizing data, which is going to come in with your analysis in a moment. A couple of names to know depending on the kind of grounded theory you're using. When it comes to post-positivist grounded theory, Strauss and Corbin, or Glaser and Strauss are the folks you want to look at. That's the most common form of grounded theory that we see used across fields. Constructivist grounded theory, again, that's Sharma's. Strauss and Corbin do this a little bit, and you'll see Strauss and Corbin and Sharma's used most often in student affairs. And then postmodern grounded theory is also called situational analysis. That looks a little bit different. That comes from Adele Clark. And then you may also see a critical approach taken to grounded theory, and there are examples from Salazar Perez and Canella that we can send to you if you're interested in taking that approach to your work. I don't think we need to read these to you specifically. But again, a post-positivist approach is looking for some sense of truth in your theory, and it's grounded in that belief that we can discover these truths through our qualitative research. If you're taking a constructivist approach, you're not a little bit less focused on truth, and you're more interested in the standpoints and the starting points of you as the researcher and of your research participants. So there's a much bigger emphasis on engaging the reflexivity here in the constructivist paradigm. And then in the postmodern paradigm, we're really acknowledging complexity and fluidity, and that there are lots of things that are ultimately ungraspable about the world, but we can still gain a better understanding of them through situational analysis or grounded theory techniques.
So back to the blue sheet and where we are in terms of data collection, I'm going to just point to that and really think through like data collection. And for grounded theory, there's so many different ways you could do data collection, right? You could use very structured interviews, and that might work well with a post-positivist frame where you're trying to come up with some form of truth. Semi-structured interviews work well, but I also know like a lot of constructivists might do more of a focus group or sister circles, or making a meal together and recording things, or draw a picture of that experience, then talk me through that picture, or photo voice. Go take pictures of what it's like at the rec center as a first year student and your perspective, then come back and the interview is based on that. So there's just so many different ways to collect data. It's really about your research question and how you want to collect to answer your research question. Analysis is, I'll keep going. For data analysis in qualitative, there's different ways to think about this. So very standard and common in grounded theory, which is why people in case study like grounded theory. People from other methodologies often draw from the methods of grounded theory because it's so clear and makes sense in the sense of open coding. Then I'll move to axial coding, then select coding, then constant comparative. So what are those with our grounded theory? The first is open coding. So it requires a brainstorm approach. It's very open. You're open to all possibilities. There's no wrong answer. Sometimes you'll see research teams where Renee, Chelsea, and I will each do open coding on our own. Then we'll come back together, but we'll come back together with our axial codes, not just the open themes. And then I'm gonna give it a code or a name. Conflict, equity, but I'm also going to move it from just that open theme to a named code and lump these together. So here's conflict, equity, and compromise that connect with collaboration. So you're kind of starting to group your open codes into kind of making sense of it. Carl Weick does sense making work, and this is it reminds me anyway of that. Now, select coding and selective coding. So now you're actually selecting for one particular core idea or concept. I don't think at this stage, if you're interested in the differences here, you can take a look at those for sure, but I just don't want to spend too much time on that. Chelsea, do you want to talk about constant comparative method?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is another unique approach to grounded theory. And I think typically we think about a research project in terms of distinct stages. And Penny already said that qualitative inquiry is always iterative, but with grounded theory specifically, you're actually doing some analysis while you're still collecting data. And so it's possible for some of you that you're already finished with your data collection. That's fine. You can still do some grounded theory. But if you find yourself in the midst of data collection, it actually, grounded theory gives you the ability to start going through and looking at what are you seeing in those open and axial codes, for example. And sometimes that can even, especially if you're taking a theoretical sampling approach like Kathy Sharmaz talks about, that can actually help you to identify who do I still need to talk to? What do I still need to do in my data collection to be able to get everything I need to reach the point of saturation, which is where you're getting pretty much the same information over and over.
And also another thing, if I may, about constant comparative method, you're actually taking the comparison between the women golfers on this team, and then the women tennis players on this team, and then the women basketball players on this team. You're doing open and axial coding for all three. Then constant comparative analysis, you're going to compare and contrast across all three. Sometimes in studies, people will do a constant comparative analysis with first, here's the students and the students' emergent themes and codes. Well, now here's the administrators. Now here's university presidents. Now let me do constant comparative method across this way. But your steps and being super clear on what your steps are and what you're doing first, second, and third, which groups you're comparing with whom, when, that all matters. So as a researcher, as you write up, it's much like a report about being just so clear on your methods. And it's iterative, super iterative. It's going to take so much longer than you think. You don't have to do all these steps, but you could just pull out constant comparative after you've done open and axial coding and not do select and selective. You could, do open coding and then axial coding and no constant comparative. It's up to you and what your research question is and how you want to do it. Just be, again, clear with your reader. And then also, what are your steps for credibility or trustworthiness or whatever you're trying to work toward? Again, you want to use the language that's consistent or congruent with your approach. Did you do member checks with your participants? Was it about the transcript? Was it about something you wrote up? Was it about the themes? Did you not do member check at all? Did you have a research team that you brought your findings to and then you talked it through and people said, oh yeah, and you kind of, each coded? I mean, there's different ways you can work on this, but your writing also adds to your trustworthiness in terms of your clarity. People will, like any report, like any research, tend to believe you if it's clear and they understand what you're writing about. I want to share some resources here that these are a number of different grounded theory approaches. And I would say, like Chelsea talked about already, if you're interested in post-positivist grounded theory, which is most published, also, if you're not really using grounded theory for theory generation, you're using it as a tool or a method for analysis, so not really doing a true grounded theory, that's okay. A lot of people use Strauss and Corbin's book. And then Kathy Sharmaz actually studied with them and she's like, wait, I'm not a post-positivist, I'm a constructivist. I really believe people's, researcher is interpreter, and she talks a lot about how her constructivist approach differs from Strauss and Corbin. So she went on her own and then created her own book, Constructing Grounded Theory. And so those are the two that I think are most used in our field, but we're happy at QualLab to talk about any of the others. I know Chelsea and I also wanted to say a few things about writing up the data. So maybe I'll start, Chelsea, and then please, add. And so I was just talking to students in my class about the writing up for data collection and writing up for data analysis, and about to submit for the IRB. And I know many of you probably have already submitted for IRB, but if this helps in terms of writing. So I was an administrator for 10 years after my master's degree and before I started my PhD. So we get really good at writing things up and knowing how to write it in a way that your dissertation and practice people will hear you, believe you, understand it, because you're the expert they're looking to, who has read your literature and you know the participants better than anybody. So I think trust yourself, trust your abilities, and kind of think about how to administer the steps for your dissertation and practice. And so one way that I was talking to students about doing this is to first write up the bullet points for all your steps. So first, here's my sample or my participants and what criteria we're going to use to include them. Then the next step is recruitment strategy. So then I'm going to recruit doing it this 3 ways. And then here's the next bullet point about my interview protocol and my arc of the interview from low risk to high risk to low risk again. So you bullet point those. Or in the case of grounded theory, I'm going to bullet point. First, I'm going to do open coding for everybody. Then I'm going to do axial coding. Then I'm going to do constant comparative analysis between this group and constant comparative back and forth. The book will tell you how to do it in more detail. Both Sharmaz and Strauss and Corbin talk about it. So, cite your source and what you're using. But after you bullet point it, you know your steps and you know what you've done or are going to do. So then just move that to prose and to your paragraph, because you will have already, your steps. It's clear, it's easy to write in bullet points, and those are your headers now. And then to expand the work here. And I feel like the findings, your dissertation practice people that you're working with, your clients, really value your opinion and your recommendations because you know this now so well, and they take it seriously. At least in the EDD exams that I've been in, they really listen and ask questions, and they're there. So you are the expert. You get to be the expert on this. And so QualLab and faculty are here to help with that, but you know it better than us even too. We can just help you with the tools to get there. Chelsea, do you want to add or?
Just one other thing that was brought up in another session that we did is to create an audit trail. If you don't have one already, you can format it in a number of different ways, but it's a list of all your different decisions and all the steps that you go through, especially in analysis. I think especially with grounded theory, where there are so many steps, it can be really easy to forget what you did first or what you did second or what order you did things. So go ahead and do yourself a favor, make your life a little bit easier, and write it down now. That's the only thing I would add.
Great. Renee, how about you? Are there any things that you want to share?
I think in addition to the audit trail, it's always a good idea to do some memoing as you're making your decisions or thinking through your choices. Those might be things you want to go back to and revisit later when it's coming time to defend. So that's also something you might want to think about.
Great point. I would say never feel like you're out there alone, right? Your cohort, your advisor, your faculty that you know that you've worked with closely or not, they're there. But also the QualLab, we do consultations, and you can sign up on our website for a consultation, and we sit down 2 GRAs to 1 student, and that way we can think with you. Sometimes I'm there. We have 2 positions that we're posting right now to really help think through. So there's also the Dentist Learning Center. There's also the Writing Center. I also suggest to people that you throw things in, authenticate. I write this in my syllabus all the time. Throw it in there because it'll show up with all your quotes from journal articles that you've cited or references that should be plagiarized. That is a direct quote you've taken from somewhere else. But it will help you to identify where maybe you're not far enough away from the language that somebody else has written about. Because like with methods, you have to say what this scholar has talked about, or let me get my constructivist grounded theory. So here's what Shamraz has talked about, and then putting it in your own language and finding your own voice as a research practitioner it's a journey. And so just trying it out and using those tools are helpful as well. Yeah, so don't feel like you're out there. And definitely reach out, and we'll be doing more sessions next semester, and you'll get there. You will.
And if you would like to look at the slides from this presentation, they're already up on our website. It's u.osu.edu/QualLab, all one word. And you click on resources. There's a drop-down menu that says resource guides. And that is where you will find this along with the slide with all the references. So please check that out if you want more information.
Thank you so much. You can do this.